I know you love earning travel rewards and cash back, and that's why you're going to love Rakuten. With Rakuten, you can earn cash back on everything you need to book your dream trip, hotels, flights, rental cars, experiences, and more, while still booking through your favorite travel sites. And don't worry, cash back can be earned on top of earning the credit card points and the hotel and airline loyalty points that matter most to you, depending on how you make your booking. Plus, with Rakuten, you can also earn cash back on groceries and other purchases like electronics, pet supplies, and more. And the best part, you can join today for free and start earning cash back on top of your travel rewards. Go to Rakuten.com or get the app. That's Rakuten, Rakuten. Rakuten, the most rewarding way to shop.
This episode is brought to you by TaxAct. Don't do your taxes alone. Join TaxAct's National Admin Night. Admin nights are social gatherings for getting through your to-do list. So get ready for a night of fun, finding deductions, and filing taxes with TaxAct, where you can file your federal and state return for just $49 through April 8. Let's get together and get them over with. Visit taxact.com/admin-night for details.
Today, you'll hear about the benefits of planning an extended trip as a, quote, mini retirement.
The only way that I even thought of taking a mini retirement was because I was actually able to kind of increase my savings rate and then realize that, I didn't have to work 10, 20, 30, 40 years to be able to build up a financial runway to be able to travel.
How long-term travel can impact your relationships in sometimes unexpected ways.
And so I think it was just a really great experience. Though, we went in as a partner, a married couple, and came through the other side divorce. A lot of people don't talk about that in our society of traveling is just about doing it with the ones we love and that we're going to enjoy every moment. There are some really hard moments. People don't realize that you take your mental health things that you're dealing with at home with you on the road. Just because you're traveling full time and going on this life adventure doesn't mean that you lock those things away and that they don't affect you anymore.
We'll take a look at some unforgettable destinations for travelers looking for adventures, both big and small.
Seeing you in Norway and experiencing the landscapes there, and then going on the Annapurna circuit in Nepal, and then going to New Zealand and hiking and camper vanning the South Island. And each of those experiences were just some of the most incredible scenic places I've ever been to.
That is today's guest, Helen Lin. She traveled with her husband at the time, Tim, for 2+ years across 20+ countries, documenting their adventures on a YouTube channel called Helen and Tim Travel, which is still up. We'll link up to that. And Helen and Tim, they saved up money for 2 years before this adventure. They put everything in storage, rented out their home, quit their 9-to-5 jobs, and they wanted to go have those global adventures they always dreamed of. And this conversation is really about the realities of the road. What happens after you do all the planning and you get out there? And Helen gets honest about travel's impact on relationships, as you heard. We'll talk about the 3 F's of long-term travel planning. You'll discover hidden gem destination recommendations in this conversation. You'll learn how Helen and Tim accrued 1.5 million credit card points over 5 years to fund their travels, and loads more. It's all happening right now. So buckle up, strap in. Thanks for being here, and welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend.
You're listening to the Zero to Travel podcast, where we explore exciting travel-based work, lifestyle, and business opportunities, helping you to achieve your wildest travel dreams. And now your host, world wanderer and travel junkie, Jason Moore.
Hey, it's Jason here with ZeroToTravel.com. Welcome to the show. Thanks for hanging out, letting me bring a little travel into your ears today. This is the show to help you travel the world on your terms, to fill your life with as much travel as you desire, no matter what your situation or experience. We're going to dive in a moment. What an honor this one was. I got to meet up with Helen and Tim in person during their trip, as you heard at the top in one of the clips. They did come through Norway, and Helen's been a listener of this show since 2014. So in many ways, this conversation was a full circle moment for both of us. And before we dive in, I'm excited to report you're going to hear Helen talk about this towards the end of the interview, but she has officially launched her nonprofit. It's called Waves of Color. You can learn more at wavesofcolor.org. It's a nonprofit dedicated to supporting the next generation of women to become surf leaders, coaches, mentors, and competitors. And this organization is committed to expanding opportunities for women in surfing locally, nationally, and globally. And more than 50% of their scholarships directly support women of color. So be sure to check that out. I just wanted to give Helen a shout out for that and make sure you had that on your radar. And don't forget also, we have a newsletter over at zerototravel.com/newsletter. It is free, goes out once a week, and you can sign up for that for free over there. Stick around on the back end if you'd like. I'm going to share the one thing that travel seems to be relentless about, which was a takeaway for me. Stick around for that. For now, please enjoy my conversation with Helen Lin. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the other side, my friend. Cheers.
First safety to speech 1900 is equipped with 4 emergency exits, 2 over the right way, 1 over the left when the door you entered. Beneath your seat you will find a life vest, and in front of you is a card that outlines how the safety features work. On behalf of Pernambuco and this flight crew, we'd like to thank you for flying with us this morning, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight.
Helen Lin, welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend. Good to see you.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. At Anchor and Pine on Instagram, people can find you if they want to connect afterwards. We got to hang out in person when you were in Norway. I know Norway is one of the destinations we're going to talk about today related to outdoor adventures, which is no surprise. So I want everybody to stay tuned for that, because on your global tour, let's call it, you did quite a lot of outdoor adventuring, and you did that. You guys did that beforehand. But anyway, I'm excited to chat with you because you were on the road for quite a long time. And so I want to get your best advice for anybody planning a mini retirement, I think you're calling it. We can talk about that, and all the way through to some of the changes that have taken place in your life and everything. So anyway, I'm going to stop talking, and I just want you to let us know about your trip that you came off of fairly recently, just so people have an overview of kind of what you've been through in life over the last several years. And that's, I think, a good place to start.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that it's been several years now that I'm hearing that out loud on this podcast. It's been about 25 plus months since I have been on the road and recently off the road. I'm in beautiful, sunny San Diego now, and finally setting up some type of home base after 2 years of traveling around the world to 26 countries. So it's definitely been a journey. And along the way, I think you had just talked about the whole mini retirement concept. It's become this kind of thing that's been ingrained in my head of like, wow, what if I could do this every, 5 to 10 years, like taking a couple, like not even a couple years, but even a few months off at a time, just to kind of like recalibrate and reimagine like where I want to be in my life and what's important to me. Because I feel like each decade of our life seems to be very different. We change as people. I think I once saw statistics saying like every 7 years, we kind of change who we are, not internally, of course, like, our minds and our souls, but maybe just like what we want out of life. So that's kind of where I'm going with this whole mini retirement concept. But before I like talk more, I just want to say like, I'm super excited to be here because this is a full circle moment. When I was prepping to come on this podcast, all I could think about was like, wow, over 10 years ago, I started listening to your podcast. Like I remember it was like the summer of 2014. And it was the first time I really found like people and like people were actually living these unconventional lifestyles, traveling and making it work for them on their terms. And I was like, wow, maybe I could do this one day. And like, it took me 10 years to finally like make that dream a reality. And then I was sitting in your living room having dinner with your family, and now I'm on your podcast. So
Wow.
this has been a really full circle journey for me. And yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. You're giving me goosebumps and all kinds of nice feelings because, yeah, I mean, back then, 2014, that's really when the podcast first started. So you were really early listener. That was the whole intention for the show. It pleases me to know and to hear that it was helpful in that way. So thank you for sharing that. And now you're here to pay it forward in some ways as a guest, right? With your advice. I don't know. That just means so much. So thank you. Let me just ask a couple more questions about the mini retirement idea, because I think that that is freeing in many ways, the way you're kind of positioning it in terms of, okay, maybe this is something I can work into my future, and it doesn't have to be like a 2+ year global tour. It can be a few months or whatever. Just that idea, I think, can be freeing or liberating in some way, because instead of staring down the barrel of, oh, I have like all these years of work ahead of me, and then, I have to wait to do this, that, or the other, you're giving yourself the opportunity or the option to have this mini retirement. Do you think that there's any mindset difference between the concept of a mini retirement and a gap year or a career break or something else?
I think they're all pretty similar in certain ways. I guess it just depends on the context of like, oh, are you currently in a full-time job and looking to take a little break and go back to what you were doing? Or for me, I think I don't know if this term is widely known, but I know it's becoming more popularized, which is the financial independence retire early community, where the only way that I even thought of taking a mini retirement was because I was actually able to kind of increase my savings rate and then realize that, oh, I didn't have to work 10, 20, 30, 40 years to be able to like build up a financial runway to be able to travel. So this concept is saying like, oh, instead of just saving, the traditional 2 to 5%, to contribute towards your retirement traditionally at 65, maybe there's a way that you can reduce the time and the years to get to that retirement age. And instead of me like saying, oh, I want to retire early, I'm just going to take a little break. So there's just becoming this more popularized term called mini retirement. So yeah, I guess in a way, sabbatical, gap year are very synonymous, and they can kind of work hand in hand too with the mini retirement concept.
Yeah, I guess one key difference may be because for some people this can just be semantics. For other people, it can be very meaningful, I think. And when you're putting it through the lens of fire, the first thing I was thinking was, maybe looking at it as a mini retirement is more based on financial education and tactics as opposed to just saving for a trip in some
Exactly.
ways.
And when you think about like um kind of that mini retirement concept, for me, I didn't want to wait until I was 60, 65 to be able to enjoy adventure travel because, our physical, mental capabilities definitely aren't guaranteed then. And I'm not saying that I can have a crystal ball and can tell my future, but I kept thinking about like, oh, am I going to want to climb a mountain and sleep in the freezing cold when I'm 65? Likely not. So it's those things like pushing the boundaries are those things that my body can handle. And it's for me, and it was kind of like now or never, am I going to wait and do this or be somewhat of a healthy adult individual and do it now? And I really started asking myself those questions before I left for full-time travel of like, what was my purpose in this whole entire trip and what did I want to get out of it? And I think that's really important for people to consider when they go into something like a mini retirement is like having some sense of not even purpose or like, oh, I need to have a side hustle or I need to create something meaningful, but like, what is the goal? Like, what do you want to get out of it? What do you envision on your travels? Or even your plan of, what do you want to see and what do you want to do? And for me, it was I want to go hike some big mountains, adventure travel and surf around the world in destinations that are really far beyond what I could do in my own backyard. So those were kind of like my big things that I wanted to really experience.
I love it. Okay, there's a lot to dig into here because, yeah, that's something I always encourage people to do is like the idea of reprioritizing your bucket list based on your physical capabilities and your age, I think is worth pulling out and mentioning again, as you just said, because it's not like you can't do those things when you're older, but you don't have your young body anymore. I can see into the crystal ball as well as you. Like we're not going to have our young bodies forever. That's just the case. So if you have some adventures, and adventure travel is going to be a big part of the destination portion of this conversation that you want to do, get out there and do them sooner than later. Like you could do some of the other quote unquote easier trips later. And I think also, one of the things I want to dig into later with the destinations is covering adventure travel for maybe people listening who, you have a lot of experience with outdoor adventures and getting outside and doing that stuff before you even traveled. But for some people, maybe it's a bit new to them, but they're interested. So I do want to talk a bit about that and some of the destinations that you've been and get some advice there. Let's talk about the intention, because you said you thought it was important to kind of figure out what the trip was going to be about for you. The first question I have on that is, did you consider the balance between that and having too high of expectations in some ways, where it was going to perhaps put a damper on the experiences just because you expected so much? Like having that sort of like beginner's mind freedom with the intention is always a bit of a balance, I feel.
Yeah, I think it just depends on, for me, it was a lot of mindset in trying to figure out the destinations that I wanted to go to and what kind of adventures I wanted to have. And in full transparency, I actually started this full-time travel with my partner, my husband at the time, now my ex-husband.
Which we'll
I
talk
think we'll
about, I think, today. Yeah.
yeah. And a lot of those adventures we did together because it was always something that we had planned to do, like, for example, camper vanning across both Norway and New Zealand and doing some big hikes, hiking the Annapurna circuit in Nepal, all the way through even some unknown destinations like, mountains in Lombok. Indonesia. But a lot of those were actually through guided services. So when we were looking at planning long-term travel, a lot of people are like, "Oh man, it gets really overwhelming to logistically, carry all your gear and figure out your itinerary and like all those things." But we actually really stuck to a lot of guided trips, which we were really surprised that we did, and a lot of them came with a lot of rental gear, buying gear along the way and donating it back to the local people, so their guides could use them again. So we try to be very thoughtful along the way. But I think to answer your question, as somebody who's beginning to get into this adventure travel, looking for almost like opportunities where you don't have to fully plan things yourself, because at the end of the day, when you plan adventure travel, we do want to support the local economy. When you're planning hikes and things on your own, sometimes you overlook, you know, like laws when it comes to hiking in national parks or protected areas, things like where are the hiking routes that maybe are safe and unsafe if you're a local and a non-local. So having that local knowledge as a less barrier to entry is something that I highly recommend. So having some local guides. And a lot of times we didn't even book them. When I say we, me and my ex, we didn't really book them until we got there because we wanted to be recommended a service versus, oh, let me look on Google. Though we do trust, people like visitors, like from the US going to these local destinations, we wanted to like hear from the people themselves and like who they would recommend. So a lot of times we would just wait and go to local operators when we're actually in the country, like boots on the ground. So I hope that answered your question. I feel like maybe I didn't. So
Yeah, no, that I think
yeah.
that's great. And
Mhm.
the idea of having the local guy, like there's some things you could do in certain places where, you could be like, oh, well, it's going to be adventure. I'll just do it myself. Like I don't need a guide. And that may be true in some places, but there is something about giving back and getting a guide just to have that local there. And also, there's the sense of comfort for somebody that's like maybe new to adventuring like that, but also giving that person like a day of work and, there's other things like that, which is nice. But yeah, the idea of the boots on the ground thing, yeah, it sounds like that worked out pretty well for you guys. I mean, are there any adventures that you wish you planned in advance versus going and showing up and asking around?
I'm trying to think. I think one particular one, maybe because I wasn't really sure the right approach. And I think this comes from like experience of just planning adventure travel when you're in a destination. I would say probably the camper van journeys throughout the two different countries that we went to, both like Norway and New Zealand. I think it was very interesting to kind of self-plan routes throughout. And I kind of wish maybe there just aren't as many, or maybe I wasn't knowledgeable at the time, resources in terms of like planning routes, in terms of where would be the best destinations to go within those countries. Like maybe creating some type of loop where we could tie in, because like when you're in a camper van, you're typically kind of like, oh, I want to see everything all at once and fit it all in, but then I still want to hike but enjoy my time in the van. So it was kind of finding a balance. So I think if I could plan things over again, the camper van journeys were awesome, but definitely took a lot more logistics. I think both of those countries, Norway and New Zealand, it was about 2.5 to 3 weeks in a camper van. And so um, camper vanning, I always call it its own beast. There's just a lot of things to figure out. The van itself, things breaking down. Um, a lot of remote places don't have, certain things available to you. So sometimes I do feel like doing a little bit more research on your itinerary is something that I would recommend. And there are way more, I think, creators out there providing those, like on YouTube, to be able to like plan the destinations within those countries. So I think I like to say I wish we would have maybe been more thoughtful on the hiking and camper van journeys in those countries. So those are kind of the one thing that I wish I would have done over again, is like being more thoughtful. But I think maybe because it was like, oh, 10 to 15 countries in, and you just kind of get complacent of like, oh, but I've already, planned this and have been used to maybe doing some forms of research. But I think that was like pre-chat GPT too. So like in terms of it being popular as a resource to plan things. So
Yeah.
So
In some ways, the longer you travel, the worse you get at it, because you just get confident, I guess. You're just like, oh, this will work out, or
Yeah, a level of spontaneity.
Yeah, you want the spontaneity. But yeah, so in that advice, I guess I would say vehicle based, it sounds like, you wish you planned ahead a bit more. But for expeditions and things like that, you found that there were always operators like with gear that had room on trips and things like that. Of course, you were traveling long term, so you had the luxury of sometimes, waiting a couple days if you wanted to go with a certain operator or something. We'll get back to the interview in just a moment. I know you love earning travel rewards and cash back, and that's why you're going to love Rakuten. With Rakuten, you can earn cash back on everything you need to book your dream trip: hotels, flights, rental cars, experiences, and more, while still booking through your favorite travel sites. And don't worry, cash back can be earned on top of earning the credit card points and the hotel and airline loyalty points that matter most to you, depending on how you make your booking. Plus, with Rakuten, you can also earn cash back on groceries and other purchases like electronics, pet supplies, and more. And the best part, you can join today for free and start earning cash back on top of your travel rewards. Go to Rakuten.com or get the app. That's Rakuten, Rakuten. Rakuten, the most rewarding way to shop.
This episode is brought to you by Fandango. People say fans are too distracted these days, but the truth is, when a great movie hits the screen, you show up, you stay glued, invested, part of the story. And without fans like you, there'd be no cinema magic, no shared moments. So head to Fandango.com to get tickets, stream, or rent or buy top movies and series. Fandango loves fans.
Now, back to the show. I still want to go back to the intention, because you mentioned that you have amicably split from your husband, and you guys were together, I think, for over 10 years, right? Do you mind if I get a little personal here?
Not at all.
Okay. So was there, in that regard, was there, because there are all these things going into a trip, right? Like you could look at it like, well, yeah, of course, part of it, a huge part of it is wanting to go see the world and have experiences. But for a lot of people, it also might be, I'm taking this career break during this mini retirement, and maybe this will help me figure out like what I'm going to do after, at least give me the space to contemplate that, right? Career is one thing. Relationship could be another one for sure. But you were traveling together as a married couple. Was there any conversation or back of your head type of, oh, let's see how this goes? Like if this, yeah, this is also a bit of a test for us. Was there any of that?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree that when you start traveling, things in the relationship can go one or two ways. And in full transparency, of course, ours went a different way, and it ended up leaving us to an amicable separation and divorce, which I definitely appreciate you asking, because I think a lot of the realities of travel, people tend to mask, maybe on social media in the public eye, saying, oh, like this life is just really beautiful and things are going great. But there are a lot of underlying things that tend to happen when you travel that people don't talk about. Maybe it's taboo in our society, but I always feel like travel can really bring out relationships in two different ways. So it's like one where you typically are living your day-to-day life in your 9 to 5 job, and you are constantly bombarded by distractions of life, right? You maybe are empathing. I always like to say we're like ships in passing night, where we never really had like the time and the place to have these discussions of like where we wanted to be in life with each other, or our goals, maybe even separately, or having kind of that emotional depth, where that was the first hand, right? And the second part was like when you start traveling, you typically are in such close quarters with each other. You're navigating transportation, like going from airplanes to trains to automobile, any type, it adds these additional layers of stress, whether it be like going to accommodations, things get canceled and things don't end up working out with kind of your travel planning, and then you maybe take it out on each other if that's something that tends to happen in a partnership when you're traveling with not even just a significant other, right? But also maybe friends or people you meet along the way when you travel. Definitely adds a layer, right? And then we were constantly living in new cities, so we went from living in a place for 2, 3, 4 weeks, even up to 2 months, and having to navigate things like going to grocery stores, figuring out where to eat, what to do, and like figuring out routines on a daily basis. And when you like replicate that over and over again, it typically can work with you or against you. And it's not saying that we weren't a very strong couple. We were definitely had a great relationship communication wise, but I think a lot of it was figuring out, like, when you're together all the time, you learn a lot about yourself. And I always call it like the university of self awareness and self discovery when you travel. And I guess my self discovery led to, oh, I really love this person, but I think we're better as friends. And I think it's also a beautiful journey in terms of travel, because you really figure out who you are, who you want to be, where you want to go. And if that's with a partner, great. And if that's not, then, that's also wonderful too. Um, and we did document all of our travels on a YouTube channel called Helen and Tim Travel, which I'm actually still actively uploading those videos now to share with the world on our hikes. The theme of our channel was seeing the world one mountain at a time. And you can definitely see the dynamics of our relationship in the video, as well as like how things were also just, our venture travel were just some of the best times. And I would just say, like, this is a shout out to Tim, but I wouldn't have wanted to travel with anybody else in the last 26 months off and on. And so I think it was just a really great experience, though, we went in as a partner, a married couple, and came through the other side divorce. A lot of people don't talk about that in our society of like, oh, traveling is just about doing it with the ones we love and that we're going to enjoy every moment. There are some really hard moments. People don't realize that you take your mental health things that you're dealing with at home with you on the road. Just because you're traveling full time and going on this life adventure doesn't mean that you lock those things away and that they don't affect you anymore. And so I always tell people that's like actually a huge piece of advice is like figuring out what centers you on the road and what grounds you. And whether, you're solo traveling or traveling with a partner or a friend is like figuring out almost like in a way boundaries of like what is going to work for you on either a short-term or a long-term level. And like for me, I think it was a lot of maybe it's good to find a little bit of separation along the way, not saying like in my case divorce, but like having some travels where you're doing on your own, exploring things in a city on your own, where you're giving yourself space and time and moments, as well as figuring out kind of like what you want along the way. Doing a lot of like self-discovery. For me, I really discovered like meditation and did a lot of self-healing in all these different countries in a different way. And so I think that really kind of gave me that perspective and awareness of like, oh, wow, this relationship isn't working for me anymore. And that's okay. And we both had really honest conversations throughout the whole time of travel. I think we traveled for about like 16 months. And then we started kind of doing, trips on our own, solo travel and spending time separately. And then that gave us even more clarity. So there's not a really right or wrong way to travel when you're in a relationship. But you definitely do figure out a lot of things about yourself and each other along the way.
Wow.
So,
okay.
yeah.
That's a lot. That's a lot to unpack, personally, between two people. The conversations you mentioned that, when you realize sort of maybe we're better suited as friends. What was that process like? Like you mentioned, starting to travel separately 15, 16 months into it. Did that come right on the heels of that conversation? Or was this like an unspoken thing for a while that you were just living with? How did that unfold relating to your journey?
How it unfolded was that it gave us time. When you are constantly with somebody 24/7, you really have a lot of deep conversations about, what your needs are, how you communicate as a couple, how you need to fill your cup in certain ways. And then also a big thing for us was like we did also have thankfully for virtual therapy, we did even like seek help and get advice from friends and family and really weighed out all of our options with the 12 and 24 months. And I know people are probably like, how does this relate to travel? But I think it's a really important thing to ask yourself of like when you travel, your experiences tend to be like super enhanced or like you're on this like another level of mindset, right? And I truly think you can think more clearly when you're not at home. So I think that's kind of what really, I would say, accelerated this separation. I think if I was at home and sitting at my 40, 50 hour a week job, doing my side hustle as a photographer and getting caught up in all of these things that I was doing, it might have maybe even like prolonged being together. Like we would have probably stayed together much more longer than um, we would have not wanted, but maybe it just becomes this unspoken thing when you're at home because you're like, ah, I'll take care of this later. Almost like you're stuck in this perpetual procrastination state of like, oh, maybe I'll deal with these problems later. And I think that's why we got burnt out from our jobs. That's why we left, that's why I left my job, working almost 6 years at a hospital, doing health research and communication. I just kept thinking, oh, like, things just get brushed under the rug and you avoid those things. But when you travel, those things become really in your face. And so I really think it did maybe accelerate the separation maybe like 2-3 years before. And I think we both look at it like we're forever grateful. So all the couples out there or people having this in the back of their mind, and definitely not going down the negative Nancy route, but that's something to consider, really having this as an opportunity and an option of saying, this could happen to me. It doesn't happen to everybody. I would say most people probably have like the time of their lives, but I have seen other YouTubers, other people that it's impacted, and I remember thinking, "Oh, that won't ever happen to me," but here we are. So, but I think it is one of those life journey things that I would never ever go back on. So I'm actually thankful that full-time travel happened because it really unfolded this path of like, wow, it led to the next phase of life.
Yeah. It sounds like you guys
Mhm.
have had really healthy conversations around this and have done the work in that way too. This is the duality of travel, one of the dualities of travel, that on the one hand, like you said, your mental health and things like that, you bring that stuff with you. So it's that idea of wherever you go, there you are type of thing. And then you have people that would say, of course, well, you can't like just run away from your problems in that sense. You're taking everything with you. But on the other hand, it's also giving you space for deeper conversations, I guess, bringing bigger questions to the forefront, I suppose. And both of those things can be true. That's the duality. It's like, oh, travel's not going to solve all your problems, but maybe it will solve some of your problems. Or I'm using problems in air quotes. It's just, you can't say, well, did you say your relationship was a problem, or that you just revealed kind of what was there and you were able to work through it and come to a conclusion for the next phase of your lives independently. So that's a beautiful thing and also a hard thing. And you're doing this while this is like part of, you're out. What a ride, Helen. Like I'm just putting on one hand, you're just having these amazing adventures. And on the other hand, it's like you guys are, dissolving this decade plus marriage. It's a lot. So many big emotions, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it definitely didn't take away from the experience at all,
No.
honestly. And
You were able to compartmentalize in some ways.
yeah, I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, maybe it was just one of those situations where, like with travel and adventure travel, you do navigate a lot of those challenges together as a couple. And, we did overcome them in the adventure itself. So I think that was a win for us. And yeah, I mean, all of the destinations that we travel to, um, I think you had talked about earlier was like um, the most special places that I remember along the way were like seeing you in Norway and experiencing the landscapes there, and then going on the Annapurna circuit in Nepal, and then going to New Zealand and hiking and camper vanning the South Island. And each of those experiences were just some of the most incredible scenic places I've ever been to. And I credit a lot of that with, I don't think I would have made it to any of those places if I wasn't with my ex-husband. So I think it was kind of cool to be able to like say, oh, wow, we made it. People always ask like, what are your favorite countries on your whole trip? And it's really hard to like give people that answer, of course, like that gets asked over and over again. But I always say like the three N's: Nepal, Norway, and New Zealand. I just keep going back to that. So
there you go. There's the magic travel trifecta for everybody listening. And then if you come through Norway, let me know. Meet up and say hi. Wow. Well, I mean, thank you. Thanks for sharing in the way you have, because I'm sure that's, it's great that you're willing to share, and that, yeah, like you said, I mean, there could be some people out there listening that are, doing their own version of this. All right, well, we're either going to sink or swim here as a couple.
I was gonna like maybe like tie that loop into mini retirement. And I think that is a symbolism of like how each phase of your life really does change. Because when we were planning full-time travel, when I came across your podcast and got inspired, and then ended up leaving for full-time travel, it had been over like 7 years. And that's like when people say, oh, 7 years, your life changes, and you are a person who has maybe a different mindset every 7 to 10 years. And so maybe that was kind of like the whole tying everything together, full circle moment, not with just zero to travel, but also with, what we wanted in travel and life. And I think without the mini retirement and having the opportunity and privilege to do that, I don't think we would have ever, or I would have discovered that this was kind of part of that path, into the next phase of like what travel means to me. And for me now, it's like, oh, I want to solo travel more as my like on my own. I never done that like ever in my 20s. Now in my mid 30s, and um, you know, this is really giving me the confidence to kind of do travel on my own versus like with a partner, which is kind of a cool thing to like finally say to myself and not feel like I maybe don't have the confidence to do that like I was in my 20s. It took me a long time to get to this point. So
we'll get back to the interview in just a moment.
Kraft Mac and Cheese is better than 90s hip hop. We'll remind you of your childhood without making you feel incredibly old. Kraft Mac and Cheese, best thing ever.
Now, back to the show. Where's that first solo adventure going to be?
Well, actually, I did solo travel in Portugal last year for about a couple months. I did this surf trip all around the country, literally bought a surfboard and carried it on a train, and, stayed in surf houses and just really like full steam ahead. When, like right when we separated, I just was like, you know what, I'm gonna do
I'm
this.
going surfing.
I'm going surfing. I'm going to Portugal. Heard only good things. And I think the next destination I will be kind of true solo travel without like seeing friends or family or meeting people is I'll be doing a lot of, I guess, a surf training camp in the UK. Just kind of going to explore. People are like, why are you surfing in the UK? I don't know. Maybe I'm just used to being in cold water after living in Oregon for 7, 8 years before I left for travel. But yeah, there's just a lot of, I think, not even undiscovered places, but places people don't think to go for different adventure travel. Like the UK actually has some good surf in the Cornwall area. So yeah, that's one of the destinations I'm looking at upcoming. Definitely taking a little bit of time off after 26 months of travel, but hopefully kind of ramping myself back up again, getting back out there after coming back to a home base.
Portugal, of course, a very popular place to visit. I'm just wondering, on that journey, were there one or two places that stood out to you that you would recommend to people here, maybe a little off the beaten track kind of type of places?
Yeah, I would say two places that I really loved. I didn't make it down to the southern part. I kind of stayed more on the north in the western part of the country. But I really loved the town of Yerisera, which is almost like, I wouldn't call it a suburb, but it's definitely a separate town out of Lisbon. It's like a 30 to 45-minute bus, or you can even take an Uber because they're very affordable out there, to go see the coastline. And it's just beautiful area. Highly recommended. And then there's this another town called Peniche. It's a fishing town. They're actually known for like their it's kind of interesting because it kind of smells a little fishy because they like have a lot of canneries. That's their main industry out there. But they also are known for their surf. The World Surf Fleet goes out there every year and has a surf competition at Super Tubos. But a lot of the beaches in that area, like Balel, are really good for beginner surf for people wanting to just like get away. Um, but yeah, the summer is definitely the best in Portugal,
Yeah.
weather-wise. So
My wife and I stayed in, is it Balel, or I always called it Baleal because I never knew how to pronounce it, but we
Baleal. Oh,
stayed
maybe
in
it is
Balel.
Baleal.
No, I don't think so. I think Balel is probably right because I never knew. I never checked on the pronunciation as I'm slapping myself on the hand. Bad. But no, that's a lovely area because you had the two sort of beaches to choose from with the surf, and it's kind of small and just, at least at the time, felt pretty cozy still in a way.
Yeah, there's definitely I think an uptick in tourism there for sure. And it's so close to all the bordering European countries. So you're often, I think I hardly met any people from the United States there. Everybody I met there were from Germany, France, Netherlands, or even Canada per se. But I think it's a lesser known traveled coastline, it seems. I think a lot of people that I met or have heard, I didn't make it out to like places like Madeira or those islands, but I think those are more frequented with US tourists, like the main cities like Porto and Lisbon, but the coastal cities. I met a lot of Europeans, which was great because I was obviously in Western Europe, so feeling really immersed with the Europeans. I think Portugal, that coastline was my favorite of a lot of the travels for sure.
For anybody listening that's thinking about mini retirement, career break, gap year, whatever the lens is that they're using for that idea of taking a break and traveling long term, are there any other lessons learned that you want to share, or maybe perhaps counterintuitive advice, whether it's on the planning side beforehand, practical stuff, just mindset stuff, really anything here that you would like to share with those people?
I would say definitely creating a runway of some kind when you're planning your travel. I think pre-planning is one of the most critical things that you can do for saving for a long-term trip or a mini retirement. I think breaking it down in three parts. Uh, for me, what was important was having a financial runway. Is like, how can I survive for 1 to 2 years without making an income? Was one of the most important things. So saving the finances, I think it took between like 5 to 7 years thoughtfully to save and put away, kind of figuring out what your monthly expenses are, how much you're willing to spend. There's definitely a lot more ways to be crafty now with lodging, where people trade like maybe pet sitting with free accommodations or couch surfing and things. I didn't go that route. I stayed in mostly hotels, Airbnbs, some hostels here and there, but it definitely increased the costs for full-time travel or the mini retirement. So really figuring out how much you need to save and how much you can last with those savings is something really important. A big thing is like figuring out how and where to keep your stuff. I ended up putting my stuff in storage for almost 2 years and renting out the house that I had owned at the time, and so that brought in some type of income. And then before that, I was like, oh, you know, I really want to like capture this big full-time travel adventure in this mini retirement with a YouTube channel. So I was able to create that channel like a year before and start monetizing that before I left on the road. So just like figuring out like almost like a timeline of events that you want to achieve in like, let's say, even 1 to 2 years of planning and saving your money and figuring out kind of your goals for the trip. Because like we ended up just having to like figure out like what our first destination was and like the route as well. And so like the pre-planning trip part of the trip is really, really critical, especially if you want sustainability on the road and um, having your money go as long as you need it to go without having, you know, work. Because the point of mini retirement is like, hopefully you're not working and or at least overworking yourself to make the trip happen.
Yeah, that's a great point. Great advice too. You mentioned the YouTube station, and we'll link up to that. I'm just wondering, how was that part of it for you? The whole creating content on the way thing, because that is a job in some ways. You know, of course, if you're having fun with it and it's just creative exercise, you don't have to look at it like that. But there is you need to get the shots, you need to like kind of make the stories and things like that. How did you find that part of it? Was that fun for you? Was it like a buzzkill? I mean, I'm just curious for anybody. There might be a lot of people listening considering like, oh, maybe I'll start, you know, creating content around my travels or things like that. What was your experience?
Quite honestly, it did take a lot more work than I had thought. I would say I'm the first to admit that I'm way behind on actually editing the content and putting it out. But when you're in the moment, what I found was that I look back and I never regret creating and filming along the way because now I have almost like a time capsule or a, you know, uh, almost like documentation of like to look back on my whole trip. And so when I think about it that way, I'm like, I don't regret it. But there were times where I'm like, wow, why am I talking into a camera on this hike when I should be enjoying it? So it does, I think, create a layer of like, wow, I'm going to be removed from the present moment on this beautiful scenic journey. So I think it just depends on for me, it wasn't about like, oh, I want to make money and be this famous YouTube content creator, but it was about really almost like a digital scrapbook of like, I do just really want to remember these travels and look back on them. And I oftentimes find myself watching these videos again and again and again. Um, but yeah, I would say like it just depends on who you are. And for me, I didn't have a problem filming at all because I just really like that you can look back and be able to relive those.
Hmm. Is there
Yeah.
anything that you would do differently looking back on the trip?
I don't think so. I think what I would maybe not do differently, but maybe what I would add is really being more intentional about my travels. I think along the way, I think specifically like in Romania, I had this idea. I was like, oh, I really want to give back to the community in some way. Um, for example, I think I was staying at this co-living place and met a few really awesome people. And then I had this thought, I was like, oh, it would be awesome to give back to the community. So ended up like just researching and randomly finding this local animal shelter. And I was like, oh, it'd be awesome to like maybe walk dogs or like give back to the community in some way. When I look back and I wish I could be maybe a little bit more intentional about like um, maybe in each country figuring out how I could like donate my time or give back my time in some way because I truly believe as stewards of the people in this world, especially when you're traveling into people's homes and they're welcoming you with open arms, like how can I, if everybody's being so kind and gracious, like how can I give back in my time? And so I wish there would be more resources maybe out there for, travelers to connect with local charities and organizations with opportunities to, just do simple things like, whether it be like, I think a lot of these opportunities are maybe in things like you've heard the website World Packers, where, maybe you, exchange your time by volunteering and then you get free lodging, but maybe in the sense of like you exchange your time giving back to the community um, because you're simply traveling there. I don't know. I think there's just this concept of, oh, I'm coming here, I take what I need and leave, but it's like, I want to come to a country, I want to take in everything, but I want to get back in some way. So if I could do it again, I would be more thoughtful. Like, okay, I'm going to this country. Let me research some opportunities I can be able to contribute, whether it be monetary donation, my time in some way, or getting a group of collected people who are traveling there around the same time, to do something nice, like, a cleanup in the community, whether you're beach cleanup or something like that, and just being more intentional. Because I think, every little thing really does add up. And I just kind of wish I did more of that. And I'm sure other people do too, after going and leaving and then realizing, oh, I could have had more impact for sure.
Okay. A few more questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, totally fine.
I'm going to call this the 3 F's because these words start with F's. First of all, flights. There are many ways to tackle a trip like you did. Did you guys, I know you booked a one-way ticket to Asia, I think, to start it off. Was that it? And then you booked along the way? What would be your best advice for somebody that's like, yeah, I'm going to take a longer trip. Should I like book all my flights in advance? Again, and this is, you can't like answer this everybody because they've got to find their own way, but what did you learn? What was your approach? Any advice around that? And I know you had like 1 million points and miles or something. I don't even know how, unless you were spending on some, how did you accrue 1 million travel points? That's awesome.
Well, I'll throw in another F, family. So the intention of starting our trip was we hadn't seen, especially my parents, since they are taking care of grandparents now in Taiwan, and then we didn't see them throughout the pandemic. I was like, oh man, that's our first stop. That's a no-brainer. So we ended up spending 2 months in Taiwan hanging out with them. And so when I think about, oh, if you want to plan your first destination, I think a lot of the concept of mini retirement is like, wow, I want to spend more time with my loved ones.
Friends and
I don't
family.
get to do
double F's. Yeah.
I don't get to do this often. So that was kind of my goal is like, I wanted to see my parents. And then from there, we aren't the type of people who just throws a dart and say, this is where we're going next. We did thoughtfully, like you said, plan by accruing 1.5 million credit card points and miles. And that was through, I think, 5 years of signing up for maybe 15, 20 plus credit cards and getting sign up bonuses along the way. And we did plan it based on seasonality because of hiking.
That's a whole different episode,
Yeah.
we can't, we can get into
I know.
the weeds,
Yeah, exactly. But also, we centralized our travels starting because we were already in Taiwan, the region of like more of like Southeast Asia, popping up to like Japan, and then timed it out with going over to Europe for the summer season and the hiking there. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, so kind of building in a way, like building little mini, I could think of it like you're bracketing, like, all right, we know we're going to be in the summer, Europe in the summer, but we have this time to work with and we can kind of keep it spontaneous, but we know we're going to get to this area of the world for this season type of thing. I think that's a cool way to do it.
A lot of people avoid high season, right, with the summer because it is really busy, everything's more expensive, and that's all totally valid. But when you're doing specific adventure travel or things that require maybe better weather, that's definitely a consideration. It does increase the cost of your trip, but it also brings the best weather where you get the grand views and, the overall best experience with these guides that you hire or hikes that you choose.
Yeah, but I will give you props, Helen, if you are able to get into that cold water with the full wetsuit and surf, like in England, like you're going to. I mean, you can almost always have the waves to yourself then.
Yeah, for sure.
and that activity anyway. No, that's quite. I don't know how you do it with the cold weather, the cold water surfing, but
That's why I moved to San Diego now. I can't do it
anymore. Okay, another F, the fears. I'm just wondering, were there, the worries, the fears beforehand? Which ones would you perhaps, I feel like everybody has these, and I like to normalize these things for people because there might be people listening right now that, even if you have travel experience, you can get worried or nervous about going to a new place or a new destination. Did you have any big fears that, you guys either were able to overcome or just like that you want to highlight? Anything around like fears or overcoming those things to still ensure like that you actually make it happen and you don't let them stop you?
Yeah, I would say some of the fears that I might have faced along the way um, wasn't from the actual like destination. I think a lot of it is like mindset of like, going to a new country in a new place, especially if you're climbing mountains in terrain that you're unfamiliar, like how am I supposed to navigate the safety pieces of things? Something I always travel with is um, a Garmin GPS device. I mean, that definitely helps offset my fears, where I can always hit my SOS button
instead of your phone, like a physical. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you have your phone, but oftentimes when you're in the backcountry, you're disconnected from all, cell phone towers. Even, well, I guess now with the current updates on our phones, you can actually, there's functions where satellite can be reached, but at the time that wasn't something that was available to us. So the big fear was like, oh, if I'm going on these hikes and destinations, like what if something happened to me? Especially if you're unfamiliar with the language, emergency services, who you could call, in different countries. 911 is not always 911, right? So knowing those things and like being familiar with what, not even like what protocols they have, but like who do you even contact in those situations, like search and rescue and things. So, I mean, that's like extreme, like hiking in the backcountry. When you're on guided hikes, you definitely have guides that are knowledgeable, trained in wilderness, hopefully wilderness first aid. And, they always have satellite radios or a communication to something. But yeah, that's definitely a fear of like, how do I navigate that? And something that we always do is at least I do still, is I always tell people my itinerary and where I'm going, like checkpoints of like, oh, expect me to check in, especially if I'm on a long distance hike, like, maybe you hear from me every couple days, or somebody always has my itinerary back home. So I know like um, how where I would be on certain days in case they didn't hear from me. That's always a best practice, especially even hiking, like in your own home country, of like always telling somebody where you're going when you're returning, especially if you're solo hiking or solo traveling. So you always know like, okay, I'm starting a hike at 8 a.m. I should be done by 4 p.m. If you don't hear from me, definitely check in. And so having open lines of communication through a GPS of some kind, like the Garmin satellite positioning GPS, and because you can send messages um, programmed with a few contacts, pre-programmed texts that you can just ping people, even check the weather with incoming weather, that's bad weather that may be coming in. So there's a lot of like safeguards that you can happen. So like the fear is just like, okay, what if something happened to me? What do I do? And I think that's applicable for all situations when you travel. Like, what is my game plan? How do I contact? Do I remember loved ones' phone numbers on the top of my head? What if somebody steals your phone, or you're in a dangerous situation or something that you're feeling uncomfortable? How do you reach those people? So not trying to instill more fear, but just, thinking
No.
about
I mean, I
those
think it's a
things.
great
Yeah.
example of,
Mhm.
common fears that are solvable, right? Like you solve it with
Mhm.
a technology piece like GPS that you mentioned, or you solve it with writing those contacts down on a piece of paper and keeping them somewhere else, or you solve it with, knowing the emergency numbers. And that's like a 5 minute, not even like a 1 minute Google search. Like, what's the emergency number here? Like, just kind of like, the worst, like sort of planning for the worst case scenarios in a way. I think it's really smart because, it's not being paranoid. It's just like, hey, well, if this is going to, having a bit of a game plan is going to make you feel better and is going to push you over the hump. Like, don't let the fear stop you from going. Just try to solve it. Some fears aren't solvable. Like, what if something happens to me? Like, well, something could happen to you, but something can happen to you at home too, right? Okay, cool. That's great advice. The last F is fun. Just going to throw it. I mean, we already talked about some destinations here. Portugal. We talked about the 3 N's, Nepal, Norway, and New Zealand. I mean, was it how many countries again?
About
26
26
months in 26 countries. Okay. Yeah.
countries. Yeah.
Do you want to highlight a couple other places before we let you get out of here and go? I don't know if you're going to go back to bed or you're up for the day now. It's so early in the morning there. Thank you, by the way, for that. It's like whatever, 5 a.m. for you now. Yeah. Do you want to share a couple other highlights on your trip that you're just like, maybe we could put this through the idea of, maybe you didn't have necessarily that many expectations, just kind of showed up and then it just sort of blew you away. Like you were surprised at what you found.
Yeah. One country actually comes in mind where I don't think I know a lot of people, at least in my network, that have traveled there. Surprisingly, is Romania. I don't know if you've ever been to Romania, but
No.
I
I
found
was looking at
Romania
it on the
very
map yesterday. I was looking at all the mountains there and I was like, oh, this is, it's funny you say that.
Yeah. So I traveled through the Transylvanian region. So they have a chain of mountains called the Carpathian Mountains. And they're pretty accessible. You do have to rent a car, unfortunately, to get to a lot of these places, but there's also certain parts of Transylvania you can just take by rail. Romania has a pretty overall reliable rail system there, and very affordable rideshare as well. And so Romania, we learned this fact I love walking tours when I get to new cities. And I remember thinking, I'm like, wow, there's all these like medieval castles and these medieval towns like still intact. And I just don't understand why that is. And I learned the fact that during both of the world wars, we were in this town called Brasov, which is um, kind of almost like the base of like people always hear about, oh, Dracula's castle, in in that area, as their kind of claim to fame, even though that's totally not even a true fact of Dracula, the story itself. But that's for another, podcast episode. But we learned from this tour guide that Romania was one of the countries that actually switched side during both wars. So a lot of their towns didn't get bombed by the wars; that they were actually preserved. And I don't know if that's fact, can fact check that, but when I learned that fact, I was like, wow, that makes so much more sense, because all of the castles that I toured along the way were just some of the most pristine, intact castles I've ever seen anywhere around the world, even beyond like Western Europe, where they're really known for those like um, grand types of structures. And I just found it really beautiful and fascinating in that, like, if you're really into medieval history and medieval art or architecture, like that's absolutely a place that you should visit. And the hiking's underrated too. Not only is it much cheaper than a lot of the places, in Western Europe, but anything from the gondola rides all the way to the accessibility, even less crowds of Romania is just unmatched. I feel like I don't hear too much about Romania, but I hope more people talk about it, because the people were absolutely so nice, and the scenery was just fantastic.
Amazing. Do you want to leave us with some food for thought here? I don't know, a quote, perhaps a last bit of advice, anything you want to share before we let you go? And then also let people know, like, do you want people to go to connect with you if they would like? Is the best place your Instagram, or what do you want to?
Yeah, my Instagram is definitely the best place to reach me, at Anchor and Pine, and I'll definitely pass along that for your listeners to connect to. But yeah, I have all my links on there. I'll be launching a surf organization and brand coming up at
Yeah,
the end of June.
let's talk about that before. Tell me about it. Wavesofcolor.org.
Yeah, wavesofcolor.org. And I think it wraps up to this journey where I think I've been searching my whole life through the means of travel, of like what my purpose is and what I want to do that is going to bring meaning. And without traveling for this many months, I don't think I would have actually figured out what I really wanted for the next phase of my life. And I've always had this deep connection to the ocean and surfing, though the mountains and hiking are right up there. But I've always had this desire to want to do more for women. It's definitely a sport that's needs more resources and accessibility, especially for women to become surf coaches. And so my organization is really going to support that and essentially channeling and creating a community and a movement to, after surfing around the world as well, I've recognized that there just isn't that many women out there as coaches. And for me, as somebody who really loves to be in the water, seeing people build their confidence and has always seemed to, like, women teaching women is something so empowering and amazing to see. And so, yeah, I would just say, like, along this journey, I found myself like pondering the same question over and over again of like, how can I give back, to the community? And yeah, so wavesofcolor.org is going to be launching this summer 2025. And yeah, that it's just going to be one of those things where I'm going to ingrain travel in it as well. So it's going to hopefully allow me to keep traveling and keep spreading the love of adventure and travel. I actually love your quotes more than I love my quotes because I know you always send us off with a quote at the end. But I think if I were to give a life quote or a teaching, is just allow yourself time to figure out who you are and what you need, and travel will show you that. So,
Wow. Okay. That's awesome. Great way to wrap it up. Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing the organization launch and all the great things that are going to come with that, and look forward to continuing to follow along on your adventures and come back to Norway sometime.
I will. Thank you so much, Jason. This was so much fun, and I'm so happy that we close this full circle moment. So,
likewise for me. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing so openly. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, take care. There you have it. I want to thank Helen Lin for stopping by the show and just being willing to share. And if this conversation impacted you and you want to reach out to her, we will link up to everything that she has in the show notes. So feel free to get in touch. And this conversation did remind me of this one thing, as I mentioned at the top, that travel seems to be relentless about. And that is birthing paradigm shifts. Let me read you the definition of a paradigm shift. It is a fundamental change in approach or underlying assumptions. You could almost imagine that being a warning label on travel. Travel, warning, may cause a fundamental change in approach or underlying assumptions. I mean, I don't think that needs to be a warning. That's a good thing. But time and again, through conversations with other travelers on this podcast and my own life, you know this from experience, travel can just change the way people view life, view culture, media, the world, their possessions, their purpose, and on and on. Of course, one of the big paradigm shifts we talked about is with relationships. That's something that came up in the show today. And there's just so many ways it can impact you. So if you are on the fence about taking a trip, I would say get off of it and know that a lot of the hidden benefits, I may say, to these paradigm shifts are not going to be discovered till you get to the other side of the trip, and sometimes maybe those aren't discovered for years. I mean, some of the things that I took from my life as a decade plus nomad, I realized years later after the experience that, this impacted my life in this way, or this actually fundamentally changed the way I live and the way I saw the world and the way I saw my own country and all of these things. And you can't predict what those are going to be. But for the curious minded, I mean, I think that's one thing that really unites this audience here. We're all curious beings. I mean, you have to be curious to get up off of your armchair traveling and actually make the effort to save up money, buy plane tickets, go to other countries, see other places, even get in the car and go on a road trip for a weekend. I mean, it takes effort. You have to have the desire. You have to have the curiosity. And we all have that here in this community. And I think that curiosity drives us and perhaps accentuates the paradigm shifts because we're open to them. That's another aspect of this. But even if you're not open to them, I still think travel can cause some pretty big paradigm shifts and do it in unexpected ways. So if you're, thinking you want to shake things up, travel can be a good way to do that, I would say. All right, I'm going to leave you with a quote from Viktor Frankl, who said, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Peace and love to you and yours. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by ZeroToTravel.com. Ideas and advice to make your travel dreams a reality.